tell me a bit about your professional life. I know you're a mom, which is already a large job,
Big
I
profession.
imagine. Yeah, exactly. And you're also a writer professionally.
I'm going to say yes, even
Yeah.
though
I mean, it seems like it, judging by your
there's
writing.
there's no there's no official credential to suggest that,
Sure.
but professional life, I kind of want to chuckle at that because my resume is like a patchwork quilt of ridiculousness. But
Sure.
because I don't know if you read my about page, but there's a paragraph there where I just list all the
All the
jobs.
things you've done. Yeah.
I'm going to try really hard not to do air quotes because you're recording this, and I do those
Well,
way too much on Zoom.
we have the video, so we could keep it. I could take screenshots of the air quotes.
Just me doing air
Yeah.
quotes. So I was going to say jobs. Um, I yeah, so professionally I've kind of been a nomad.
Hmm.
And I've primarily pieced together part-time work to make something resembling a full-time salary, which I've never been able to do because part-time work doesn't pay very well.
Yeah.
I also tend to be a little antsy, and like if I look back at my resume, it's like 2 to 3 years and then I'll move on to something else. And sometimes it
Hmm.
worked out because I was having a baby, so I had an excuse, and then it would take 2 to 3
Sure.
years on that baby, and then I had another baby, and but I've run out of babies to have, so I don't have that
You have
excuse
two
anymore.
children?
I do, yes.
Okay. How old?
My daughter is 8 and my son is 11.
Okay, so you're out of one neck of the woods for another one now.
Yes,
Not that I know anything about raising children,
heading
but
into preteen years, which is a little bit terrifying.
sure. In this era, I imagine as well. I mean, that's something I want to be getting into with some of your stories. You definitely have an angle I would probably agree with on what technology is and where it's going and
mm,
how we might avoid some of those pitfalls.
I'm very wary of it, and I've
Yeah.
always been sort of resistant to it. It's funny, and I'm getting off topic because you asked me about professional
No,
stuff, so I
please. Yeah.
apologize. I'm just gonna get off topic, but because I'm embarrassed about my work history.
I mean,
No,
also
it's
this is
fine.
the beauty of the conversation. Yeah.
I've done a lot of different things, and I've always sort of leaned toward some kind of artistic. I studied theater in college.
Okay.
So when I got out of college, I thought I could somehow have a career in theater in New England without, going to Boston or New York. And I pieced a lot of things together. I did a lot of, work for stipends.
Okay.
I did choreography. I did summer stock. I directed some things, but it was always just sort of piecemeal. But I'm a frugal person, so it was never like I was super struggling. I just
Sure.
was
I
always
hear
sort of
you.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things Americans do not get taught is that you don't need to have a lot of money if you don't spend a lot of money. The
Exactly.
assumption is you have to have a lot because you spend it all the time. Obviously, certain places it's just extremely expensive now in the States. So you do
Mhm.
need a lot of money just to subsist. But I've been in Paris since 2010. And I mean, I consistently say, even now, if you're an individual, so single, whether not single or not, but you don't have kids to raise, if
Mhm.
you're making anywhere between 2 and 3 grand a month net, you are comfortable. Uh,
Right.
because life is relatively cheap here. And
Mhm.
that it's just a different lifestyle. Obviously, there's a different valuation of daily activities, one being walking, which you can just
Mhm.
do for free, and the other being sitting on terraces, which is $2 if you buy a coffee.
Right. Piece of
Um,
business.
you've been writing since you were a kid, though, I imagine.
Yes, I've
Yeah.
always been writing.
Okay.
Yeah, so in third grade, so like my first credential I just did air quotes. God damn it.
Love it.
Um, and I'm gonna swear too, and I apologize for that.
Good.
Feel free to
This is an
good.
uncensored
Okay, good.
recording.
This
Yeah.
is a swearing room.
Right.
Um, so yeah, in third grade, we had a sort of award thing in our school system called Young Authors. So I won Young Authors for this book I wrote. I think it was called The Inchworm Journey. And my mother
Wow.
brings it up all the time, like, oh, such a wonderful story. I'm like, I was in third grade, whatever. I actually have it. See, I have like this whole box full of, you're a diary journal person, and I
Yeah.
have a lot of journals and creative writing folders from like, second grade on. So I do sometimes peek at those and find them quite
Have
entertaining.
you ever considered sharing some of those on the
Oh
internet?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I sent you a link because we were going back and forth in each other's comments for the last, 10
Yeah,
hours.
right.
We were trying to learn stuff about each other. I posted around my birthday last year a story I wrote when I was 9, which is kind of
Awesome.
like a
Okay.
twisted version of Snow White that I wrote.
Oh, cool.
And
Is
like
this like
what
an Angela Carter style? Is it
it's not dark. I don't know who Angela
okay.
Carter is, forgive me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, she like rewrote a lot of the Grimm's fairy tales in the 70s. She did The Bloody
Mhm.
Chamber, which is a collection, but she did the best one was Little Red Riding Hood, which uh she kind of rewrote as this feminist retelling where Little Red Riding Hood is an absolute badass that
Oh yeah,
slaughters the wolf and kind of takes the
yeah.
house from the grandmother and lives a happily ever after killing the grandmother, which is
So it wasn't like that.
okay.
No, mine is more. It's funny in the comments. A lot of people said it was satire, and the whole reason I wrote it and posted it on Substack was I was trying to get people to guess what year I was born based on some of the references I made in the
Oh
story.
wow. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I had like a little contest where like, oh, guess what year I was born, and I'll let you send me a photo and I'll write a story, and so it was just kind of a way to engage. But
Did somebody win?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, a guy named Will Dalton who writes fiction on Substack, who's great.
Oh yeah, sounds familiar. I think I've
Yeah,
seen his work. Yeah,
he's around.
cool.
Um, so that was fun. But yes, and I have like a lot of like I have considered posting some other stuff too. Just I would write in my creative writing journal because I was in a class in high school, and sometimes I just didn't have anything to write about, so I'd write these things called writer's block, and they had like writer's block 1, writer's block 2, and it was just like a rant about how I didn't know what to write about, but they were actually kind of funny and like something I would write now. Like
Yeah.
my voice is so similar to what it
Uh-huh.
was when I was a teenager, which is hilarious.
Which I think is also part of why it's so authentic, because you can tell it's you've lived in that voice. You're not trying to do something. It's just you, which is such a, I mean, I've told you that before, but it's such a refreshing thing to see in an era, especially even on a platform like Substack, where oftentimes I think people try to be something just for the right audience and it
right.
inevitably fails, but you seem to have kind of jumped that lily pad without having to be on it.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much an effort as, I mean, my earliest stuff I think is safer.
Okay.
Because I sort of tiptoed in a little bit. But I got a lot of feedback about, you know, oh, this ends too nicely, or this
Mm-hmm.
wraps up too neatly. Like I want, the whole thing about leaving a story with questions was something I wasn't doing as much in the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've kind of stretched into that a little bit. And it's
It,
fun. Like,
yeah.
prior to this, I didn't really write short fiction. I came to Substack after having like a really prolific year of just vomiting novels.
Okay. So
Just
that's what I mean. That's a
yeah,
great segue. I had a couple
vomiting
questions
novels.
related to
Excellent
that.
segue.
Yeah. Well, because I have a lot of questions for you. The first thing because I read in one of your pieces, I think it was, well, there's a German word which I'm not going to pronounce correctly, Fernweh or Fernweh.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can't
So
pronounce either. I
you
can
can't
write it.
pronounce any. Yeah. So I love. I mean, you were in this piece. You were speaking about the importance, but also unimportance of setting and how you, as a writer, don't care so much about the details of any given place.
Right.
Uh, and this German word Fernweh, which means Fernweh, which means yearning for a place that we have not yet been to.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Very
Yeah. I
true.
mean, please.
Yeah.
I was curious
I,
what.
and I didn't. Somebody handed me that word. Someone who had read one of my
Okay.
books. They said,
Right.
"Oh, it gave me the German word we can't pronounce."
Right.
Um, so then I looked it up a little. Yeah, it's kind of like not a direct translation, but yes, it's sort of that nostalgia for something that's not really tangible. It's kind of like you create it yourself because
And
there's really
so is that something, because you spoke about how your voice is relatively similar to when it was when you were young. What has writing always been for you in that sense? Is it a departure, an escape towards something better, something newer, something different? What's the motivation there?
I definitely think a lot of my writing is sort of exploring spaces or experiences that aren't mine, but would
Mm,
be mine if I was a different kind of person
cool. Right.
or a braver person. I think I read something on one of your posts where you talked about Well, it's like your life is crazy interesting and you've done a lot of things and you've experienced a lot of places and people, and I'm not that way, but
Okay.
I still feel like I want to write like I am.
Yeah.
Very active imagination, so that works out well.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's also, there's something as authentic. I mean, because this is one of the, you can experience all manner of things, and just because you had the experience doesn't necessarily mean you digested it or even took anything out of it. That's
right.
one of those mythologies you first learn and break when you come to Paris, is that you can spend a lot of years thinking you're living something that actually doesn't mean shit, you know? It's
Well, it means
just,
something, but yeah.
it means something maybe in retrospect, but there's a lot of what's the term, brownouts, you know, not necessarily
Mhm.
related to alcohol, but you just, there's long periods you just kind of say, I kind of don't remember what all those years were. Even when I went to Italy that year, you know, it's like, it's, context is everything. If you don't have the right framework for looking at it, then you kind of just let it pass you by, you know?
I also find too that because I write a lot of young adult fiction,
Mm-hmm.
that my high school years, I kind of revisit them a lot,
Cool.
mining for like emotional arcs and things, because I was very, it's not that I was unhappy, but what I find is like there are chunks of your life where everything's just kind of going your way. And I
Right.
don't find that you tap into those as often, because they do kind of just blend into this, like after I met my boyfriend, now husband,
Yeah.
I could spend a lot of time thinking about those years and writing about them in a very fond, remembrance
Mm-hmm.
kind of way, but they don't really conjure up a lot of hard feelings or
Sure.
difficult feelings. And that's the kind of stuff that I like to write about, the stuff that's more challenging. So it's interesting because because I'm in my 40s, I got like 10 years on you, I think. What are you, 35?
Yeah, I'm 35. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you sounded uncertain. You're like
Yeah, I
approximately.
think I'm around there. Yeah.
I'm 35.
Yeah.
So obviously what was happening in the world and technology wise and stuff in my 20s is very different than it was for you. So I think about that too. Like
Mm-hmm.
my wedding anniversary is coming up next month, and I was sort of talking to my husband about it and how
How many years are we talking
it'll
here?
be 19. It'll be 19.
Wow. And I presume obviously that you were
I was
together a couple of
young.
years before you got married.
Yes, we got together in kind of the cusp of 99 to 2000, and then we got married
Okay.
in 2004. So it was only 4 years. But
Well,
then we waited 8 years to have kids, which was good.
okay. I
Um,
applaud the longevity. I always ask, I have a lot of walking clients that of course are oftentimes couples, and I ask that as the essential question, is what is the secret? Because no one ever has the same answer. Oftentimes not even the same answer as their partner.
right.
Um, and so I will have to ask you that, is what is that 19 years of marriage? What is a succeed? I don't know. I don't like saying successful marriage, but you're still obviously happy and in it. So,
Well,
you know,
and we talked about this too, my husband and I. Like, I think what happens, and we were youngish when we got married. We were 20, so I was 24.
mm-hmm.
Um, a lot can change about a person and situations in like even that 10 years from like 24 to 34.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
people change their mind about things like having kids in that 10-year period. Like you think you know what you want when you're 20 something. And I think the key is, and it's not a key that you necessarily are given, is that when you change as individuals, you still like each other.
Yes.
Because sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
Sometimes people grow apart rather than together. Like
That's
my
very
husband,
good advice.
yeah, well, and it's not even advice so much as
Right.
just that's
Recognition. Yeah.
my explanation for why I'm still married to my husband, because I still like him and we're
Right.
friends,
You get along and you're friends.
Yeah,
Exactly. Okay.
exactly.
So one of those questions, the 5 for 5,
Mhm.
the piece about your 5 novels. I mean, I could spend the whole hour talking about how you actually went and wrote 5 books in what, a year.
Yeah, I know.
Um, but I don't really, that's less interesting to me as what the cohesion amongst those are. You mentioned that it's young adult, which I'm curious, why are you drawn to that genre specifically?
Mhm.
Particularly because when I read your short fiction, a lot of it seems decidedly not young adult. And
Right.
that's just happens to be some of the short fiction I'm most familiar with you and that I feel most connected to. But young adult is one of those genres in America now. And if you want to publish a book, that seems like the number one aside from romance. And I've read
Doing
some of
both of
your,
those things, and yet I'm still not published.
yeah, but that's because the publishing industry is broken. I mean,
It's
I'm honestly kind of amazed that if someone like you is having trouble finding an agent and a publisher, then this is further proof for me of why I will be printing out my novel myself.
well,
You
and
know?
I should come out and admit too that I haven't put in the extensive effort that
Right. But send
to be able to
1,000
say that I
query
fail.
letters.
Yes, I
Yeah.
haven't done the 1,000 yet. I'm just chipping away, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm getting it back into it this fall because I feel like I want to be able to say I did it, so then I can pick on
Yes,
public
for
and
sure.
be like, I'm coming from this from a place of this is how this happened.
Which is a very valid, yeah.
Yeah. So with YA, so it's funny when I started, I kind of started toying with the idea of writing to be published. Like I want to say it was like between my two kids being born. So I was home a lot
Hmm.
and I was reading a lot of children's books. So
Right. Right.
I really started out writing picture books. Um,
Okay. Are you suggesting that you didn't read Dickens and Virginia Woolf to your infants?
I really didn't. I didn't. But I was selective. I was picky. Because there's a lot of bad picture books, and I don't mean they're bad message wise. They're just badly,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But then there's good ones. And picture books is interesting too because somebody wrote something recently about this, about bestsellers and how what's different about picture books is they last a long time. Like once a picture book is popular, then that's going to be a generational
Yeah.
popularity. People are going to still be handing that down to their kids like for decades.
The evergreen content model, right? Yeah.
Right. So I started there and I was just sort of writing things for fun. Again, you talk about this. I started reading your two-part thing about your poetry collection when you were 8, which I want
Oh,
to read
right.
the
Yeah.
second half of. Yeah. So I was just kind of writing for myself. And I think my husband, he's a teacher, an elementary school teacher. So he brought some stuff to share with his coworkers. And I actually have a fairly good gift for rhyme, which of course, when you get into like writing children's books in a professional realm, they're like, don't write rhyming picture books because no one wants them. And meanwhile, every other picture book that's being published is a rhyming picture book.
Right.
But you got to be good at it. And I actually think I have a knack for it. But
Okay.
so I was doing that. And then I had another baby. And so I stopped having a reason to do anything other than change diapers for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Manchester. And I'm trying to think of when I picked it back up. I was working a job as a church office administrator. I kind of made the decision to just
Right.
give it up and start really writing. So I took a class. I'm part of an organization called SCBWI, which is a children's book organization. I've been with them since 2015. But in this year that I decided to stop working, I really got into it and I attended a conference. And then I signed up for this year-long class for writing children's books, including YA. So it was like picture books, middle grade, and YA. So I went into that class. It was 3 semesters or 3 trimesters. Sorry. I do know how to do a little bit of math. Not a lot, just a little. And so I started out, bringing some of my picture book texts in. And then I think that fall, I actually cranked out a middle grade novel, but it was a little bit too short. So it was probably needed another, 8,000 words on it to be the word count that is acceptable. So that was like a step in a different direction. And then I just started reading a lot of YA, which I've always, if I say always, but I have been doing. And I'm just going to be the cliche person who read every Harry Potter book and all
me
the
too.
novels. Yeah. So that's one of my memories. One of the memories of my 20s that I have is standing in line at Barnes and Noble for the next Harry Potter book. Like every time one came out with my boyfriend, now husband, and my college roommate. And like, this was the kind of nerdy stuff I was doing. But yeah, the Hunger Games. And then I, just started discovering more authors through this class I was in. And I just got super into YA and mostly YA romance, which you'll learn when you like start reading YA, that even YA fantasy and, you know, the other genres, there's always an element of tension in there
Right.
because that's
That is
being a
about the
teenager. Yes.
forbidden kiss. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's always, even if it's like subtle and it's not part of like the main plot, there's always a hint of that.
Well,
So
so you
that,
have, I mean, this interest. Why do you think YA? Because you also have a very distinctive kind of darkly comedic, almost dystopian edge, depending on the stories I'm reading, which is,
yeah,
I think, a great juxtaposition to the YA. I'm curious why YA from a philosophical sense, why that genre and romance especially.
right.
Um, and then your counterbalance, which is, I mean, I was thinking of Memory 5, is that it?
Mhm.
Yeah, that I just love that story, which
Now
uh
that I would classify as YA because those kids are
okay.
under 19. So by definition, YA is if the story is centered around a person of that age group and they're dealing with things that people in that age group deal with. So like sometimes people will throw an example out, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where a teenager is sort of part of an adult world and that's not really the same thing. But as long as they're dealing with like teenagery issues, things like, you know, identity and family stuff and
Sure.
romance, then it kind of gets classified under YA. So that's interesting that you picked up that one because I did consider that YA.
Okay.
Um,
Right
so
on. Yeah.
I guess I live in a YA headspace because these are like the repressed desires of my 17-year-old self. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like,
Yeah, I didn't want to phrase it like that, but I'm always
yeah,
curious with YA writers. I mean, there is a certain
there is a little bit of that. Yeah. The
okay.
stuff I didn't do and didn't say. It's like all those like, you know, conversations you have in your head and having a chance to like put those on paper, even if they're between people that aren't me and anyone, you know, there's always a little
Right.
bit of me in there.
There's a
Um,
living vicariously through your fictional characters, certainly.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
that. And I just get like warm fuzzies and good feelings from like young people figuring shit out or
Okay.
not
Yeah.
figuring it out. I mean, it's either warm fuzzies or it's icky fuzzies, you know, but like it's like it's just there's a lot of feelings in there and I'm big
Mm-hmm.
on feelings. Um